Well, welcome to Liverpool and to our own very special party here on the flight deck of the Royal Naval frigate HMS Beaver. Now, we've come to Liverpool for a very special reason, and if you'd lived on Merseyside 50 years ago, you'd know that reason well enough. Because it was Liverpool's docks and Liverpool's dockers that kept this country alive in those wartime years. If it hadn't been for the merchantmen in those convoys across the Atlantic, bringing food and fuel supplies here, we might well have been starved to surrender. It was the bravery and the sacrifice of the people who kept those convoys moving that finally broke that Nazi siege. We've got some of those people here tonight. Among them is Captain Ian Fraser, one of the most highly decorated men in the Naval War. We have able seaman Jack Bird, you'll be seeing him later. And we have a wartime wren, Gwen Frethny. She worked in the underground stations here directing those convoys. These are our honoured guests, veterans of the Battle of the Atlantic. They may be marching under their own colours and in their own columns, but the old ones, the veterans, will tell you that it was together they fought the war from Liverpool, to put the Germans down and to keep the rest of us alive and kicking to finish the job. HMS Beaver's here for VE Day, but what an everyday, every hour sight it was 50 years ago, a British warship coming up the Mersey. For Jack Bird, it was a chance to relive the past. A helmsman in the Atlantic convoys, they let him bring this modern warship into harbour.
Steer 144.
Steer 144.
Bearing on this contractor now at red 5, continue to draw left.
Never expected this today.
I say.
On a ferry across the Mersey, he joined other veterans of the Atlantic War to pay homage to those who did not survive it. And after a moment's silence, as each remembered his own mates who had died, they threw a small wreath into the river that had carried so many sailors away for the last time, men and boys.
But there was lots of young boys on those ships, you know. There was 14 and 16. There was 300 young lads went down with ships. I was one of the fortunate ones. I was never torpedoed.
They reckon there was over 20 U-boats attacking the convoy. It lasted for 8 days, and we lost in excess of 25 ships.
I sailed in the largest convoy of ships ever to cross the Atlantic, 142 merchant ships. As far as the eye could see, from horizon to horizon, was a forest of masts.
The Battle of the Atlantic was the war's longest-running campaign. If we'd lost that, we'd have lost the war. And in those early years, we almost thought we had. Hitler sent his U-boats, known as Wolfpacks, to sink the merchantmen and their protectors, and by late 1942, the U-boat commanders were blowing them up faster than we could build them. But then Churchill ordered the Royal Navy's hunter-killer ships, which used the new British sonar invention to detect the U-boats, and that, and the determination of our captains and crews, turned the tide. Soon the Atlantic was made safe again, but at such a cost. Over 120,000 seamen lost, 2,500 ships sunk. Wrens at the Atlantic Command's headquarters in Liverpool only saw it happening on the wall maps and chart tables. In their hideaway, 30 feet underground, they plotted every convoy's journey, every U-boat sinking. 50 years ago, Gwen Frethny was one of the Wrens working here, and this weekend she shared her memories with her grandchildren, Nicola and Tristan, showing them how it was done.
They would bring one out like that. That meant that another merchantman had been sunk. And it was a very sad moment because a lot of good men had lost their lives.
Was it all bad in the war then, Nana?
No, it certainly was not. We did have our bad times, but we also had our victories.
And winning back the Atlantic was Merseyside's own special victory. That's what they remember today, when this city kept its heart alive and our wartime bellies full. Well, Michael, you can see why we decided to hold our celebrations here in Liverpool tonight and the debt we owe to those people who fought that Atlantic War. That's why we feel very privileged to be here among them this evening.
Yes, it's a magnificent story, Mike. What are your plans for the rest of tonight?
Well, as you can hear and as you can see, we've got a 30-strong Royal Marine Band. We've got 150 guests. We've got half the ship's crew. We've got a rather large helicopter parked in the corner, all in the size of half a tennis court. So I think we're going to have a pretty stupendous evening.
Well, we'll share a bit of that later. Thanks a lot. Now, the Second World War is often called the People's War, and certainly the morale and the spirit of the ordinary civilian was a crucial ingredient of victory. Factory workers, air raid wardens and firefighters played their part. But it wasn't just an urban experience. The countryside and country people did their bit too. There was the Land Army and, of course, Dad's Army, the Home Guard. Every village has its wartime story to tell. And tonight, Joan Thurkettle is with the villagers of Roxwell in Essex.
Well, Michael, what a weekend we've been having here. It's brought back so many memories for so many people here. And you know that one thing that people remember above anything else is the spirit of togetherness, the sense of mutual support that was born during the war. This whole area was surrounded by American air bases. And the GIs, of course, would come into the village and have a look around. Well, when Bill Harrington came into Roxwell, he found himself a bride. Bill, how did you and Nancy meet?
Well, I had a date with one of her friends, and her friend didn't show up, so Nancy came along from a Girl Guides meeting, and she said, well, I'll go help you find her. And after 50 years, we still haven't found her.
And something very special happened in Roxwell that day, Nancy, when you were married.
Yes, it did. During the war, the church bells didn't ring because that was the signal for an invasion. And we were married right after the war ended. So the church bells rang for a wedding for the first time.
Well,
when we were
great
married.
sentimental journey for you both. Stay up.
In the village church with family and friends, Nancy and Bill Harrington renew the vows they took 50 years ago.
The Lord look kindly on you and give you peace all the days of your life.
Without the war, they would never have met, never have married. Nancy was one of 80,000 GI brides.
Present.
From the nearby base at Milden Hall, the American Air Force came to honour them. Over the years, little has changed in the picture postcard village of Roxwell, and memories of the American involvement are still strong.
We had the Marauders stationed at Winningale, the planes, the Americans, and we used to stand in this back garden here and we used to see them come up and go into formation and go off. And as children we used to sort of stand and we used to count them back, and we knew exactly how many had been lost on that mission.
In May 1940, the Home Guard was set up, a volunteer force of 1.5 million men, the oldest of whom was 85. It became known as Dad's Army.
When I first started, we had a stick. We was lying in the hedge up the road waiting for the Germans to come with a stick. We used to have parades down the old mill on a Sunday morning. And we used to go out from there on exercises for a couple of hours. But we always finished at 12 o'clock.
Why?
Because the pubs were open.
And the Chequers pub, where they all met, is not much changed today. Food rationing didn't end until 1954. Cultivating every piece of land was imperative, and country people were often the envy of their city neighbours.
Everybody done their garden. Well, we had to do it for food. We used to live on our gardens. Potatoes, greens, beans, peas, carrots, parsnips, everything you can think of. Lettuces, we used to have lettuces all the year round.
For the next year or two, food is going to be the biggest...
This part of England became the nation's breadbasket. The Land Army, a force of 80,000 young women, helped with harvesting. They were billeted all over the country and, along with evacuees, stayed on local farms. Prisoners of war also worked in the fields.
We found the Germans were very good, but
bit more difficult, the Italians, to get them to work. They used to clear off.
And when you consider this was a week's rations for one person, it was essential everybody pull their weight. Today the over 60s had a taste of how it once was. The menu straight out of a wartime cookbook: rabbit pie, corned beef, hash. In Roxwell it's been a weekend of fun and laughter. For young and old alike, the village spirit lives on.
Please don't take my sunshine away.
Well, Michael, I'm ready for a dance with Private Hyder here. But come back and join us just around midnight, because we're going to see this weekend out with a bang.
But Joan's not the only one having fun. I've been promised the last dance by Colin Welland. Now, if you were too young to remember the real thing, then your image of wartime Britain is probably defined by Dad's Army, the bungling makeshift home guard, spivvy black marketeers, and of course the busybody air raid warden with his cry of "put that light out." Now, thanks to the character of Hodges in Dad's Army, the Jobsworth image of the ARP warden has never quite recovered.
What are you doing down there, boy?
I'm picking up me hundreds and thousands.
Well, get up. Are you in charge here now, Miss Sponge?
Hey, just a minute. You can't go interfering. This is an ARP matter.
Why don't you mind your own business?
And stop pushing everybody about.
Look here.
Put on the road, you great lumber.
Go on, pick up some hundreds and thousands.
Warden, after you.
Right.
Lovely stuff. And with us tonight is Hodges himself, Bill Pertwee. Bill, first let me say, you've been in great demand this week, haven't you, at village dues?
I have a bit, yes. Yes, I've been around quite a lot.
What have you been doing?
Well, I've been to sort of these evening gatherings. Went to a place in Surrey where it was rather like an aircraft hangar. A lot of people, very hot, and couldn't wait to get away. But it was very nice.
Sounds like a good party, at least.
Everybody was enjoying themselves, and they have been all over the place.
Yes.
I mean, the villages have all been decorated wonderfully, I think.
Yes.
It looks good out Surrey there. And Shamley Green and places like that. Wonderful. The town's not so much.
No,
Guildford.
the villages is the heart of it all, you're right.
Guildford in Surrey. 3 flags up in Guildford.
Shameful.
Shameful.
Right. Tell me about the air raid warden. What do you really think of the air raid warden and the image of the actual characters?
Well, I mean, he had to be a caricature, didn't he? Because he was Mannering's private Hitler. And he was a bumptious, loudmouth coward, you see. But actually, the real air raid wardens were very brave. I mean, they really were. We had an air raid warden in our place. They didn't have a great sense of humour, I must say, because we had Mr. Martin, who was a builder by day. At night, he'd put the tin hat on and walk about the streets. As soon as there was an air raid, and you'd hear the shrapnel hit his tin hat. He didn't take any notice of it, he didn't. Still walking up and down. Dad, get down the shelter, there's a raid on. Get down to the shelter, lads. We'd hear this going on, and we'd pop our heads out and say, "We're in the shelter, Mr. Martin. Don't argue with me, get down the shelter." What was that? Ridiculous.
What about the other characters from Dad's Army? I mean, the spivs, you know, the black market business. Did you have much knowledge of that?
Yes, I was involved a bit in the black market
you?
very early
Now
on.
it can be
Yes.
told.
Yes, I was about, I suppose, about 14, maybe 15 then. We had the Canadians around us in Sussex. We moved 3 times. We were in Sussex for a part of it, near Dartford another, and Westcliff another part of the war. But in Sussex, the Canadians were over there getting ready for the Dieppe landings. And we used to fix them up with the girls.
Yes.
You know, and there would be the pecking order. The lieutenants and the captains would want to know the girls of the village who came from the rather nice families, and the corporals and privates. Well, they were quite happy with the chambermaids' daughters and things like that. But the colonels and the captains, you see, we used to arrange a meeting at the 6 Bells pub. That was the place. I mean, it's the 6 Bells pub. Go down, and it was like blind date, really. We could see if they liked them, and if they did, we'd get a tin of ham from them. We'd get a packet of sweet Caporal cigarettes, 200, or Camel cigarettes, whatever it was.
There's a word for what you were. You mentioned the food, wartime food. We saw it there. It was. Did you like it?
Well, there was the Walton pie, which was the thing, you know. But there were some other dishes, you see, which people didn't know too much about. But they were made. There was pilchard layer cake, and fish and savoury custard. Another one. Oh yes, beetroot jam. Everybody made beetroot jam, of course. But those two, the pilchard layer cake and the fish and savoury custard, we used to get that down and up again pretty quick.
What about yes, right. Spam, I remember, Colin. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do remember spam, yes.
Did you like it? Did you like the food in the wartime?
Yeah, well, I never knew any other food, did I? I mean, I remember looking at on the railway stations at these iron chocolate machines.
Oh, yes.
And wondered if they ever had chocolate in them.
Or what was a banana? Strange tube.
They raffled a banana at our school. Yeah, they brought one round and showed it to
you're
them.
going to make me cry in a moment. Bill, thanks. Back in a mo. And we're going to head back now to London's West End to see how the festivities are measuring up at Piccadilly Circus. Judith, how's it going?
Well, it's going very well indeed, Michael, thank you. Well, you can hear, you're having fun in the studio, so are we here, with young and old alike, people from throughout the United Kingdom and from many countries around the world. But I'm actually with two very special people now. You may remember we showed you a photograph earlier of two young ladies who were actually celebrating together at VE Day. Well, there was Molly, who now lives in Northern Ireland, and Terry, who actually lives in Canada. And they wanted to get together, and I know Molly went to great lengths to try and find Terry. She's come over specially, first time they're meeting for 50 years, from Vancouver. Right. So join these celebrations. Terry, welcome back to this country. What was this first meeting like after 50 years?
Very easy, wasn't
it? Yes.
I recognised her as soon as she came across the walk, and then we took off from there. That was it.
What were you talking about, Molly?
Oh, just how wonderful it was and how wild we were, because Terry didn't know that the war was over. She woke about 6 in the morning in the hostel. I had gone absent without leave and come in late. And I asked her what she was going to do today, and she said, I don't know. And I said, what? And the war is over? And we went mad.
Yeah, and it's all worth it then. I mean, what have your VE Day celebrations been like? What have you been up to?
Absolutely. Oh, everything. Just everything. Molly's been back to her camp where she came from. I've been back to Benson. I went back to Halton with my husband's been with me. We were married there 50 years ago last Christmas, so we had a golden wedding anniversary.
Oh, well, congratulations, and I'm very glad to see you both here tonight, I must say. I know, Molly, that you actually went to Buckingham Palace that day and saw the Queen. In fact, along with 1 million people, went down the Mall to see the King and his Queen and the young princesses. Well, in fact, that scene was reenacted at lunchtime today as the crowds waited to see the royal family on the balcony. In their tens of thousands, people flocked down London's Mall to watch the celebrations at Buckingham Palace. Through the palace gates came the Victory Parade, in all shapes and sizes. It was a grand day for reenacting one of the proudest moments in history. Out came the Queen Mother, the Queen and Princess Margaret. And to everyone's delight, they joined a sing-along led by Dame Vera Lynn.
And after the fanfare,
Wish me luck as you wave me goodbye.
It was almost the same scene half a century ago. The royal family appeared 7 times that day, though not always together. The young princesses, Elizabeth in her ATS uniform, and Margaret, who was too young to wear one, sneaked out to soak up the atmosphere in front of the palace.
The great thing was not to be recognised, so we were all dressed down, and everybody was in uniform. Anybody who wasn't in uniform looked out of place. So I wasn't allowed to join the army because I was too young, and services, I should say. And so I was rather sort of kept at the back. The crowd was always shouting, we want the king, we want the king. And my mother's brother David kept on saying, and the queen. So everybody was very happy. Everybody was linked arms, down the street. Everybody was drunk with happiness.
As darkness fell and the lights came on, the crowds got even bigger, and the royals appeared on the balcony again.
And suddenly, the lights came on and lit up the poor old battle-scarred palace, and my mother was wearing a white dress with a tiara, I think, and all sparkled. And there was a great roar, from the crowd. It was terribly exciting.
VE Day was as much a relief for the royal family as everyone else who'd suffered in the war. Buckingham Palace was bombed 6 times in all. The Queen said she was glad because it meant she could look London's East End in the face. Princess Margaret remembers the damage caused by one bomb.
Came in under the radar, you see, came down the Mall. I had to go right and left round the Victoria Memorial, so the bombs went sort of crooked, and luckily they weren't killed. It killed the gatekeeper, which was so sad. And then it hit the chapel and the swimming pool and the middle of the quadrangle. And mercifully missed the king, so, you know, it was a bit of luck. One grew up pretty quickly, you know. A lot of people got killed that one knew, and the bombing wasn't at all nice. And as I say, everything was so fraught, you know, and everything was loud and black and gloomy. And that's why, of course, this VE Day was sort of wonderful, sort of, you know, sunburst of glory.
Princess Margaret's recollections of VE Day. In a moment, we'll be going live to the memorial flight of the Royal Air Force. We'll see the Lancasters, the Spitfires and the Hurricanes, the men who fly the vintage aircraft today and the men who flew those magnificent machines in the war. Stay with our VE Day celebrations. Welcome back. They've been immortalised as the few, the fighter pilots who in the summer of 1940 over southern skies defended the nation from the Luftwaffe in the Battle of Britain. It was perhaps the pivotal event of the war and certainly the most celebrated. The Spitfire and Hurricane pilots were the dashing heroes of that encounter, but no less heroic were the men and women of Bomber Command, crews and ground staff who destroyed the German war effort and ultimately brought Hitler to his knees. In all, nearly 60,000 airmen and women lost their lives in the war. Today, their memory is kept alive through the Royal Air Force's memorial flight. Tonight, the vintage planes and their crews are taking a well-earned break after a hectic weekend of flypasts up and down the country. Norman Rees is with them at RAF Northolt in Middlesex. Norman.
Well, their propellers may be shut down, but after their busiest weekend ever, these historic aircraft are still putting on a show. They've been rolled into this huge hangar here at Northolt to provide a colourful backdrop for the RAF victory celebrations. The men and women who are keeping these planes flying today are playing host to some of the wartime veterans who flew them 50 years ago and won us victory in the air. But the main priority for the memorial flight today was, of course, that flight over the balcony at Buckingham Palace. Paul Shenton was there flying a Hurricane. Paul, it must have been quite an experience.
Oh, it was, yeah. I was amazed at how many people were on the ground, and also being at the back of the stream, I could see all the other aircraft. And it just brought it home to me what a great privilege it was to say thank you.
Paul, thank you very much. And for the wartime aces here, of course, it's a chance to get close once again to the planes whose exploits they made famous. We've been out and about with other wartime veterans, including a former Spitfire pilot who's got even closer to the action.
We'll take off and then we'll go up to 2,000 feet and I'll trim it out. And then I'd like you to have a fly. Yeah. So I think it'll all come back to you.
Air Commodore Christopher Mount isn't just remembering the past, he's reliving it. He was 26 when he flew Spitfires in the Battle of Britain. Today, he's 81 and reaching for the skies again over southern England. 50 years on, he claims to be just a little rusty, but it doesn't stop a VE Day victory roll. He reckons the best fighter pilots are naturals.
You've got to be able to fly the aircraft quite naturally. If you didn't have to worry about handling the airplane, you could concentrate on doing your job of work, which is to look for the enemy aircraft and attack them, hopefully shoot them down.
Chris Mount's wartime buddy, Dennis David, is a natural. Pictured here in his Hurricane, Dennis shot down 20 enemy planes. Battle of Britain pilots, he says, were angry young men.
It's seeing these horrible black crosses flying over England. We hadn't asked them to come. And they were bombing my own mother, who lived in London. So there's another side to you as a man comes out, it's a form of aggression, and you have to get rid of it. And the way to get rid of it is against the enemy.
Victory in the Battle of Britain cleared the way for Bomber Command to take the fight to mainland Europe. 40 Lancasters take off from RAF Hemelswell on a mass bombing raid. Among them, this plane, V for Victor. These are the only colour pictures of RAF operations during the war, and we traced 2 of the surviving crew from the mission. This is wireless operator Ron Woodin and bomb aimer Geoff Burchill. V for Victor is over the German capital.
Bomb doors open, Bombardier.
Over Berlin, it was their pride and joy like London was to us. So when you came anywhere near Berlin, you had a lot of activity, ack, fighters, searchlights, everything. So it was much more difficult and more hair-raising and more dangerous. You're prepared for everything and you must be right on your toes to keep out of trouble.
Geoff and pal Ron Woodin are celebrating VE Day in South Africa. The bonds between them now just as close as they were with the rest of their crew 50 years ago.
There was a bond there between us that is stronger than family in a way. And we just work together.
And this morning, it was another Lancaster that took pride of place in the flypast over London. No targets for the gunners on this VE Day, just a chance to enjoy the view. And what a view! Dead ahead, the Mall, the crowds, and Buckingham Palace.
Visual with Buckingham Palace, very good visual.
And it's the pride of the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight, the Lancaster, a Hurricane, and a Spitfire that are, of course, here with us tonight in the hangar at Northolt. And what a day it's been for the pilot of that Lancaster, Flight Lieutenant Mike Chatterton, who's with me now, because standing alongside him is his father, John, who flew Lancasters during the war. John, I imagine never in your wildest dreams did you think that 50 years on you'd be seeing your son lead the Victory Flight Past on VE Day.
No, never. But I must say that at 75, there's nothing better calculated to keep the embers of your life glowing than to find your son doing something that you did yourself, living the best years of your life.
Of course, you were flying under entirely different circumstances, a very dangerous period of your life. What was the closest you ever got to being hit?
Well, the Germans, they knocked a few holes out of my Lancaster once or twice, but they actually never wounded me. The worst that happened to me was when we were shot at by our friendly forces as we were crossing the coast one night. I think it must have been the Navy.
The Navy? Well, I think we'll spare the Royal Navy their blushes there. Mike, a very special occasion for you. What did it mean to you to be at the controls of the Lancaster today?
Well, I think for the last few days especially, millions of people have been wanting to say and find a way of saying thank you to people of my father's generation for what they did in the war. And for me today, I feel very lucky and honoured to have been able to fly the Lancaster down the Mall and over Buckingham Palace in salute to the men and women of Bomber Command. And it's a gesture of gratitude for what they did for us.
Mike, John, thank you very much indeed. Well, the party continues here at RAF Northolt. A lot more